Good morning. Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? I know Mark Whiting is in the house. I think Dan Cullen is here as well. The chat is just playing catch up at the moment. But good morning, everyone. Hope you're fit and well. I'm going to go over to Instagram. Grand AM is watching. Mark Alexander Steel Designs is watching as well. Jim Turner has just arrived over on Facebook. Morning, Jim. How are you doing, my friend? Have you started work on the new excavator yet? Be interested to know. I know Dan Cullen was here early doors back. Well, I say early doors, not early for him. Good morning, all you filthy animals, ladies and gentlemen, plant porn addicts alike. Are you ready for today? Are you punks? Let's make my day. Well, I'm going to do my level best, Dan. Rest assured. Too much information. Not sure what that refers to. Okay, but we're here. We're here and we're ready. We're firing all cylinders. Actually got some good news out of the government coming up in our news section today, which I didn't expect to do. But we'll be getting to that in the fullness of time. So while the chat is actually catching up, should we just crack straight on? Because I've got quite a long morning monologue today at the end of the show. Quite a few videos to get through, including some from left field. One in particular from left field, but a couple from left field. So what say we get cracking? I think we probably should. So let me do this. Good morning from an overcast Wakefield, says Mick Dalton. Morning, Mick. Good morning to you. In my rush to get things underway, I'd completely forgotten we've got a competition to do today, which when I can find it, it looks like that. There you are at the top of the screen. Let me show you what is up for grabs. It is that hat right there from Rockbusters over in Canada. Probably the only one of its kind in the whole of the UK, as far as I'm aware. Rockbusters hat, up for grabs today. The instructions on how you might win it are going across the screen there. All you need to do is type the word Busters, BUSTERS, into the chat, and you'll be in consideration for the prize. We'll be doing a draw towards the end of the show. What do we got? Andy Dalville says, bonjour, bonjour, bonjour. Ça va bien, merci. Le singe est dans l'arbre? Or something. Mercy JD Johnston is here saying, good morning. Good morning to you. Where are you actually watching from? Be interested to know. We've got a couple of entries to our competition already. Two so far, so keep those coming in, would you? I'll leave the instructions on the top of the screen for the foreseeable future. Dan can't say my knees and legs are crossed. That sounds awfully uncomfortable, but well, I'll keep my fingers crossed for you. We're up to 3 entries because Mark Whiting's just joined, and Mercy JD Johnston watching from London. The finest city in the world. Apart from the bit where I grew up, but the finest city in the world. And if anyone wants to know, Battersea, that's where I grew up. Ken Hatcher has just arrived. Ken, there's a competition going on. If you look at the top of the screen there, you'll be able to see exactly what it is and exactly what you need to do. Let me just flash the hat one more time before I tell you what's in today's show. There you are. It is a Rockbusters hat. Still got the labels on it, and well, as you'd expect, it's even got the lining in it. There you are. It's not been on my old noggin at all, so it's there and it's ready to be won. So it is Tuesday the 24th of March. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the walrus of demolition, the Lord High Chancellor of live streaming, the authentic voice of the global demolition industry. And in today's show, Case combines iron with intelligence. We're heading back to ConExpo with Hyundai. You think concrete mixers aren't sexy? You might need to think again. And I haven't seen Gary in the chat yet, but we're talking Steelwrist as they're getting ready for SaMoTeR. Plus, in today's edition of Mark's Morning Monologue, Tech-induced atrophy. I'll give you a heads up. Tech-induced atrophy. What I'm talking about is the potential for operators to get too dependent upon tech. And I actually question whether some already have. Now, I'm coming at this from a tech lover. I love tech myself, use it myself. Do you know, I've got a slight concern. This is just goes to show my relationship with tech. When I've written the morning monologue, I actually put it through Google Gemini to check spelling and grammar and stuff like that, just to make sure it says what I think it says and it makes sense and everything else. I wonder, because there are now AI detectors out there, I wonder if, having checked it through Google Gemini, whether I might fall foul of that. But as I say, I use tech. I'm dependent on tech. You know, I've got little devices like this on my desk to allow me to do this show and stuff like that. I use AI. Am I too dependent on it? Are you too dependent on it? One of the things that did occur to me after I'd written it, funnily enough, it was only up when I got in the car. I wrote this yesterday afternoon. Well, I finished it yesterday afternoon. I actually wrote it on Sunday. But I got in the car last night, and my wife's car has got reversing camera. And I must admit, I've kind of become dependent on it. When I was taught to drive, I was taught, you know, when you're reversing around a corner, you know, looking over your shoulder, possibly arm around the seat to get a good view and everything else. I don't do that anymore. I'm basically reliant upon the camera. The camera works very well, and it's got reversing sensors. So if I get too close to something, it bleeps, and it even bleeps in the right places to tell me where the obstacles are. Am I too dependent on it? Am I as good a driver today as I was when I learned to drive with a manual gearbox, hand-powered windows, and actual looking over my shoulder to reverse? That's my question for today. I can tell you, giveaway, we're up to 6 entries. Now, Rockbuster's hat looks like it's going to be popular. Dan says, to be honest, I think too many ops are too dependent on tech. Yeah, I'm not going down the line of you know, the notion of solar flares obliterating our technology, and all of a sudden, you know, you'll be sat there all reliant on your big brother system in your excavator. There'll be a solar flare, and all of a sudden you're back to a completely manual machine. I don't actually buy into that as a notion. But what if? And I also wonder about things like depth restrictors and height restrictors. You know, there was a time when, you know, you were taught that was part of your common sense. Check for overhead power cables. Make sure you're not going to hit them. You know, we know there are services down there, so only dig to 6 inches rather than 6 feet, and so on down the line. Are we now too dependent upon technology to guide us through? That's the morning monologue today. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But as I say, we've got kind of good news from the government, which I don't say very often. So back after this. So this is from Building magazine this very morning. The government has announced plans to abolish retentions. The proposal is part of a series of measures unveiled by the Business Secretary. The government's unveiled plans to abolish retentions in construction under a series of measures. Said the measures were part of the toughest crackdown on late payment in more than 25 years, since the 1998 Late Payment of Commercial Debt Act. It said the Small Business Commissioner will be given sweeping new powers to investigate poor payment practices, adjudicate payment disputes, and fine the worst offenders, with penalties worth tens of millions for firms that persistently pay late or fail to comply with the new laws. In a statement for the Department for Business and Trade, it says, we also propose to ban the withholding of retention payments under the terms of construction contracts, consulting on its implementation. This will prevent small firms losing retentions to insolvency on non-payment. And it goes on. That bloke there, that's Peter Kyle. He is the business secretary, and he says far too many businesses are forced to shut down because they've not been paid. That is simply unacceptable. We're unveiling the strongest, most robust changes to payment laws in over a generation. Laws that will transform the fortunes of small businesses for years to come and make their day-to-day lives much easier. Frankly, I'm of the opinion that retention should never have existed anyway. We're going to withhold part of your payment just in case we're not happy with what you've done. I think that's sketchy. I also wonder about, two things. If specialists and subcontractors don't actually have to make some kind of contingency for non-payment of retentions. In other words, the job's going to cost 100 grand, but we're going to call it 110 grand because you're going to withhold payment and we need to cover our ass. If they're not required to do that anymore, does that drive tender prices down? I'm thinking probably not, given the way that the world works. The other point on that is knowing how adept some of the major contractors are, tier one contractors are, at withholding payments, sitting on payments. I wonder if they already have systems in place whereby when you sign up as a preferred bidder with them, you will be required as part of that to agree to 60 days payment, 90 days payment, some kind of ex gratia payment whereby you agree. It won't be called retention. They'll call it something else. But if you want to work for us, that's what you'll agree to. As I say, I think that's good news from the government. I think they're making the right noises. Just don't know if it's actually going to pan out in the fullness of time, but we shall see. Now the chat has just gone quite busy for some reason. What do we got? It's the same as when Google Maps came out. People can't read an atlas or have a sense of direction. We've seen people driving off cliffs and into rivers as a result of following their sat nav. So it's a good point, and it's a fair point. Jim says the new digger hasn't been delivered yet, so no progress. Fair enough. Never used any technology. As I say, I'm a huge fan of technology. I'll use myself as an example. I can already write. That's how I've earned my living for the last 30, best part of 40 years. I've earned my living as a writer. That's what I do. And I trust myself 99.9% of the time. But when I was on a magazine, I had a sub-editor. So I'd write what I thought was the perfect article, give it to them, and they'd always find, spelling mistake, grammar mistake, something wrong with the punctuation or whatever it might be, and they'd put it right. Well, I use AI to do that now. If AI was outlawed tomorrow, or if I was forced to go back to using a manual typewriter, it wouldn't matter to me. I would still be able to do what I do because I fundamentally understand the process of writing. My question is not so much for the older operators that have embraced technology. I'm thinking more of the up and coming operators, and I'm going to go over to Andy Dovell because Andy's still quite young. I'm going to go over to him in a second, but those ones that have come up never having known life on site without some form of technological backup, could they do their job if that technology was not available for one reason or another? They find themselves on a new site where the technology just doesn't exist. They go to work with a new company that hasn't embraced technology, and you might have spent 10 years operating an excavator with GPS and all the drive rails that go with it, but you then land on a machine that is entirely analog. Are you still as good a driver? That's what we're going to get into. I said I'd go over to Andy, and I'm going to. GPS is obviously helping you. As you can see the job in 3D in front of you. You don't have to bone in constantly. But I'm not sure about all the intelligent control. That is taking the skill away from it all. That's my point. That is my point. Dan says, that's interesting, but the other thing is, will it actually go through? That's on the retentions. It is a consultancy at the moment. A consultation, not a consultancy. It's a consultation at the moment. I can't imagine anyone voting against it, aside from a handful of tier ones who quite like the idea of retention, but we shall see. Andy Thornton says, morning all. Good morning, Andy. Nothing is as good or as bad as first reported, but this is long overdue. One of the biggest problems in construction mental health is money issues. Yes, it is. And I think that there is a temptation with that. When we talk about mental health and money issues, there's a temptation to believe that is a worker problem. You know, the digger driver who didn't get paid and takes his digger to go and wreck the reception of a newly built hotel or whatever it might be. We've seen that in the past. But there is a stopping off point before you get to that guy. You imagine you're a small business, let's say a small groundsworks business, and you've worked on a housing development for one of the majors, for a tier one, and you're owed 100,000, 200,000, £500,000. Not only can't you get your hands on the money, but you have got your team to pay. You imagine you've then got the stress from both ends. I haven't got the money, and I've also got a team of people that want their money. I wonder about the mental health of those in between that have done the job quite rightly, delivered precisely as they said they would, and they're now suffering because a tier one is sitting on the money. So hopefully it's a step in the right direction. Ken says, I've used like a GPS, prefer the old way. Fair enough. When he said he didn't use tech, he meant on his machine. He loves his iPhone. That's the tech. Yeah, absolutely. I can see developers finding a way around this. They will have people digging out a way to pass it. Yeah. The older you get, the more you realize that is often the case. Somebody introduces a new rule, new regulation, new piece of legislation, and there will be people that just go, "Yeah, fair enough. I'll embrace that. I'll mend my ways. I'll take that on board." And there will be the others think, "Right, okay, new problem. How do I get around that? I've got an idea." And they will circumnavigate it. Absolutely. Andy Darvell, 41, a mere spring chicken. You're 20 years behind me, mate. And you look it too. New operators will be fucked in the future if they drop on a site and are asked to drive a machine with no mod cons. Yeah. And when you think about, look, I will get to the show proper in a minute. And I'm interested in the fact that Jim brought this up, because Jim, like me, is an advocate for machines hanging around on site for a bit longer. Rather than chopping them in at 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, hang on to them for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Maybe you could do a remanufacture, a bit of a rebuild or whatever it might be. So there's a lot of current generation machines out there that are perfectly adequate, perfectly suitable for remanufacturing, that do not have all those mod cons. So the lack of mod cons, I know it feels like there's a tidal wave pushing us towards the embracing of technology, but the time that technology becomes universal is still a long way off. We could have people arriving on site, I say people, we could have operators arriving on site for the next 10, 15, 20 years and coming across a machine that they're expected to drive that has little or no mod cons, as Jim said. Will they be able to drive it? And will they be able to drive it as safely and as effectively as somebody that was born and raised on that sort of thing? What do we got here? Andy Dalvell says, I was lucky when I started operating plant in 2001, still using profiles and travelers, learnt the proper way, but GPS was coming in, so I learned it easily, as I'm from the PlayStation generation. See, I'll be asking a question in relation to Formula One in the morning monologue about whether the drivers of old who drove by the seat of their pants or the drivers now with all the technology, which of those is the better? I reckon that Andy Darvell hit the sweet spot, learned the old ways, but also understands the new. I reckon he could be, not personally, I mean, I've seen him, he's a bloody good operator, but I wonder if he is in the sweet spot, has got the intelligence of old, but the embracing of the new. I wonder. Jim says, GPS will stop folk learning to read line and level instinctively. Yes. Yes, it will. Exactly, Jim. Too many mod comms in all equipment is spoiling operators. Technology, says Mick Norton, doesn't automatically lower operator skill, but it can if it's used as a crutch instead of a tool. There's the cutoff point. You know, if mine is a crutch. Mine is a crutch. I tend to write what I write quite quickly, and then I've read through it, but you can't always see your own mistakes. Bung it through Gemini and see what it comes out, and it will always find mistakes or things that could be smoothed out or whatever it might be. But I use it as a crutch. I don't sit here and say to Chat GPT, I need a morning monologue tomorrow to keep these buggers happy. What have you got? I don't do that. Andy Darvell says, pre-AdBlue machines, yes, they broke down, but nowhere near as much as they do now. AdBlue causes so many issues. Yeah, and I, have you ever spilt AdBlue? It's a stupid question because I'm sure you have. I had wife's car, hybrid. I had the big carton jug container of AdBlue, and the nozzle wasn't on right, and it all went down the side of the car. When you see what actually how it forms into like a chalky residue, are we sure we want to be putting that in our engines? Are we certain? Because it looks bloody horrible. It really does. It looks like it's been designed actually to clog your machine rather than to keep it clean. We'll come back to that. Anyway, let's crack on, shall we? Let's have a bit of Caterpillar, and then we'll have a bit of Case. Good morning to Chris Ford, and point Chris to the top of the screen because this fine hat is up for grabs today. All you got to do is type Busters, Busters into the chat. No, you haven't missed it. It's still up for grabs. You're okay, Chris. Don't worry about that. Somebody over on Instagram, Harron, says, I drive a Volkswagen Golf 2-litre diesel with AdBlue. And how is it? And Chris Ford has just entered the competition. Let me have a very quick look. Oh, we're up to 7 entries. Do excuse me. If you are watching over on Instagram and you'd like to enter the competition to win that hat, you've got to go over to probably YouTube is the best bet. Demolition News 1. That's what we are over there. Go and enter over there, and you'll be in the draw. Dan Cullen says it's unbelievable the issues with this AdBlue crap. It's pig's piss and chemicals. I think we've established that it isn't actually that. I'm fairly sure that's a discussion we've had before, but it is. Nasty stuff. It is nasty stuff. And Dan says that's why we should top up every day or two to keep it fresh in the tank, and undercover as sunlight doesn't help. It certainly didn't help my wife's car. Really took some scrubbing to get that off. Anyway, and Andy Deville. That's why you can't just turn your machine off and then isolate it. The unused AdBlue needs to be pulled back into the tank, or it will start to crystallize in the line. That's not good, is it? When you think about all of the R&D money and man hours and expertise that was poured into taking engines from stage 3 to 4 to 5 and then on beyond that, and their solution was synthetic pig piss that may well crystallize in your fuel line. That doesn't sound like a complete answer, does it? And I realise it's a slightly odd analogy to draw, but people that have decided, I'm going to give up smoking because it's bad for my lungs, how are you going to do it? Oh, I'm going to start vaping. I'm going to breathe in some oil-based vapor from a shop that didn't exist a month ago and that may not exist next month. But I'm sure it'll be fine. Are you really? Are you absolutely positive that's a good thing? Andy Darwell says it's synthetic urea, or at least it was. Yes, that was my feelings as well. Chris Ford says, how many machines out there have had the AdBlue deleted? None. Who would do such a thing? No, everybody is abiding by the rules of AdBlue. Yeah, right. Mick Norton says, with today's training schemes being cost-driven, the industry is in danger of producing operators who can follow a screen but not read the ground, can load a truck but do not understand material behavior, and those who can drive but not operate. That should have been the title for today's show. Well said. Mick Norton says, my son used a cheap AdBlue alternative and it invalidated his warranty on a new Mercedes. Yes. Yeah. And Dan is also, like me, not aware of anybody deleting the AdBlue. I said we're going to be talking about technology at the end of the show. We're going to get some technology on board beforehand. Let's go and have a look at what Case is doing and their embracing of all things technological.
Broken, disjointed, complicated. For too long, fleet management has operated this way. Case is on a mission to change this by uniting iron and intelligence to deliver the most cohesive, most capable technology ecosystem across every job site. Our solution, a simple, unified platform built on 3 functional areas: productivity, safety intelligence, and connectivity. Case 2D and 3D machine control unlocks site efficiency, reduces manpower, and increases profitability. Case's new remote control changes how work gets done by allowing equipment to operate wirelessly when no operator in the cab. Live telemetry and video feedback support safe, precise, remote operation. Safety intelligence brings awareness to the job site. Powered by Case's perception platform, equipment gains real-time situational awareness, detecting hazards and risks, warning operators, and supporting autonomous functions through visual and environmental data-driven alerts. The next generation display envisions an intelligent management system, optimizing material loading with precise measurements, improving productivity, reducing errors, and lowering fuel consumption. Connectivity brings everything together. At the center is RoofAx, Case's intelligent hub that consolidates sensors and communication modules, enabling precision function and seamless integration of remote control, perception, and the next generation display. Beyond the machine, the Case e-commerce platform enables dealers to sell parts online through My CNH Store, streamlining purchasing and reducing downtime with broad inventory access. And My Case Construction, the newly released customer portal and app, provides real-time telematics data for connected machines across the fleet. The next stage of innovation is already underway. It's connecting the back office to the dealer, to the machine, to the operator. One ecosystem, one intelligence, one seamless operating experience. Simplify the complex, connect what matters, unlock performance across the entire operation. Case is powering the digital transformation of construction. Built smarter, built connected, built for what's next.
No idea why they had such a long ending on that, but there you are. That is case technology. Speaking of technology, let's have a go. Dan says, back to it now. I'll be listening in. My fingers are now sore, being crossed for so long. I'll be doing the draw in a couple of minutes, Dan. Don't you worry. Andy Darvell says, I miss seeing the black smoke and hearing a machine bark when she was working hard. You knew you were working the machine then. You just don't get that beautiful sound anymore. No, you don't. And with the advent of electric and ultimately hydrogen, we'll be getting even less. Chris Ford, this is an interesting point. Years ago, the particles that came out of a diesel engine were that heavy you didn't get a chance to breathe it in. It was only when they put cats and DPFs in did they get health problems. Interesting. There's a kind of a parallel with that in the demolition industry. We'd worked for years in demolition to move man further and further and further out of harm's way with demolition robots, high-reach excavators and exclusion zones and what have you. And then we all got a bit of a boner for recycling, and we had to recover every last scrap of material, which then pushed men back into the workplace and back into the danger zone. Yeah. You didn't think it through, people, did you? You didn't think it through. Chris Ford says, if you followed an old car pre-80s down the road recently, you can sure smell the fumes. Funnily enough, I don't recall ever thinking that's a pre-80s car, but every once in a while you do get a whiff. To me, it's a whiff of nostalgia. All my cars used to smell like that, but you're absolutely right. Andy Darvell says, I've got a 1993 Mark 1 MX-5. You can smell the exhaust when she starts being really rich, but I love it. And the plinking from the exhaust when she's turned off and cooling down. You don't get that anymore. You don't. No, but my wife's car will sit there and blow a fan for bloody hours after we've switched it off. Exactly, Andy. I love the sound of a pure grunt of a 6-pot turbo under pressure, says Dan. Such happy times, simpler times. We'll be back after this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Yeah, we're heading back to Las Vegas in the company of the fine folks at Hyundai right now.
Building a comfortable tomorrow.
And here's another person thumbing his nose at the environmentalist. Mike Wolf. Morning, Mike. My old Suzuki two-stroke leaves a smoke trail behind it, and it's exempt from ULEZ. It says over 40 years old. Oh, deep joy. Smoke trail. Love it. Mick Norton says, back in the day when involved as an operator with a scraper, dozer or grader, it predominantly entailed judgment and not automation. Yes. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. If technology can make you more efficient, fantastic. If it can make you more safe, fantastic. If it can make you burn less fuel and run at lower costs, fantastic. But where is the judgment? Where is the operator's judgment? The very thing that basically operators have been paid for, that their judgment and their experience and their understanding of how the earth moves or how a building moves under demolition. That's what we're talking about. We're going to be back in just a moment with something I don't think we've ever featured a machine of this type ever. So stick around.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
And Darvell is in agreement with Mike Wolf. Two-stroke is the smell of the gods. It doesn't get any better than that. Wish I still had a two-stroke bike. Well, Andy, Mike, meet each other and talk two strokes to your heart's content. I realise you have to be in the business to understand this, but sometimes you look at an excavator and you think, yeah, that's cool. That's a cool-looking excavator. Sometimes you see a dozer and you think, yeah, that's there's dozers, but then there's this. That is a sexy-looking dozer. Nobody has ever done that about a concrete mixer, as far as I'm aware. Nobody's ever thought, that's a sexy-looking concrete mixer. Maybe it's because they've not seen this one. I think that was from the Pacific region, but I think that is an Italian-built machine, which is weird because we're talking all things Italian in just a moment after this. Going back to that Davino, yeah, that was pretty cool. Taking tech from track dumpers, indeed. They do make dumpers. I'm not sure if they make track dumpers. I'm playing this over in my head. I'm sure they make dumpers, but I'm not sure they make track ones. They may well do. Mick Norton says, funny though, how in 2026, some construction site experience catastrophic drops in productivity the moment machine control is offline. Yeah. And do we factor that in? Do we make allowance for, GPS outages? They do happen. Dan says, exactly, there's no judgment on sites now with young generations, unfortunately. This is why new operators should have an experienced operator show them the way. Wouldn't argue with that at all. One of the things that I'm sure somebody will point out, maybe not today, but at some point in the future. Yeah, well, you don't need mentors. You don't need mentors because in the future there'll be an AI where you can actually just say, I'm doing a job that I've never done before. What do I do now? And the AI will advise you. When you go in completely blind with an AI, trust me, you get some very, very odd results. I hope that's not the way we're headed. And Dan says, I've seen some very tidy mixes. Not as tidy as that, though, surely. Surely. You will remember last week. I think it was like that. They all blur, but I think it was last week. I was in Fair Verona over in Italy. We were there for the pre-SaMoTeR conference where we got together with a bunch of the exhibitors that are planning to be at SaMoTeR in May. And we got to talking to a bunch of them, and we filmed some videos, and we're going to bring you one of those videos now. This is the first of the manufacturer ones. We did one with the general manager of SaMoTeR back end of last week, but this is the first one we've done with a manufacturer, and this is Steelwrist.
So it's the first time that Steelwrist is present at SaMoTeR. So we are very happy. We are in Italy as Steelwrist since 2018. Italy is a market where the tiltrotator, the quick coupler, was not very common. We have a very big demonstration area with 2 excavators, a Volvo 145 and a Kobelco SK59, should be, with 2 demo driver, very good demo driver, very expert. And yeah, we will present the new quick coupler, the SQ40, that is the smallest one in the family of the fully automatic quick coupler. And I think that Italy is a strange market for this thing because there is still people that don't use the quick coupler. But I think that this small one could be a very good for people that we don't reach for the moment. So the people with a small excavator, but that work a lot and they need to change a lot of time, and maybe they are only one person, so they need to save time. So they will understand the good of this product and the efficiency. They are very price sensitive, so they try to buy everything as cheap as possible. But slowly, we are entering with these people and they see that, okay, spending money on this kind of machine permit them to make a lot of money because they can do a lot of jobs they didn't do before. What we are doing, I think, quite well in Italy, me and my colleagues, is to give a lot of information, a lot of support to the customer and to the dealer, because as well as excavator dealer, they don't know the product or they have very few knowledge of the product. So I think that the most of our job is just to give information, explanation on how it works, the maintenance, and a lot of aspects they don't think about. They just stop at the price. We are always going around. Yesterday I was in Bolzano, near Austria. Last week I was in Napoli. 2 weeks before I was in Sicily, while my colleague was in Turin or he was in Florence. So yeah, we are always going around because we are collaborating a lot with the excavator dealer. I think we have to, because we can explain our part, but then you have to connect to the machine. And every machine has different way to use the roller, different signer they need for the security. So it's very important that they do their job on the excavator side, and we just talk about tilt rotator and the quick coupler. We go to visit the customer, maybe to change some settings if they need more power or more speed, less speed. We have a very good relation with everybody, with excavator dealer, with the other manufacturer, because I'm talking a lot with, for example, the last 2 months, I talked with SaMoTeR, with VTN, with Travibene, with, I don't know, many, even some local producer of bucket, Marchi is an example. And they have clients with a quick coupler, the SQ quick coupler, so they need information about the adapter plate. And we are very happy to collaborate.
It is time for the competition. Thanks to Max Merlo. That was the general manager for Spain, Italy, and Portugal for Steelwrist. It is time to find out who has won our Rockbusters hat. 7 entries. And I'll do this and I'll go over to the chat, as I've already got it on the screen. Here we go. And I've just seen Andy Darvell's latest comment. I can't wait to get to that. Here we go. Mr. Hatcher. Mr. Hatcher. There you are. You've got yourself a Rockbusters hat. Loving the new photograph, by the way, of you in Vegas. Is that Paris behind you? Is that it looks like maybe Paris behind you? Can't quite tell, but yes, thank you very much indeed, Ken. You've got the hat. You'll need to remind me of your address because I don't keep it. But there's Andy Darvell saying well done. Going to go back to 2 parts of the same thing actually. Andy Darvell says this: work next to tall buildings or loads of trees, and you'll have no GPS. Good luck, young blood, he says. Yeah, absolutely right. And Mick Norton on the same subject says when the GPS drops out or a sensor fails, the true operator skill level is exposed. It is, which is ideal when we get to what we're about to get to. But I do want to finish off on this from Andy, who was talking about our friend from Steelwrist. Love the Italian accent. If I was gay, I think he'd be required to be gay as well. but I'm sure you could figure it out. But I guess neither of you are, so it's not. It's all academic. But yeah, Max Murdoch, very, very nice guy. Really good fun to be with. Looking forward to catching up with him in May. That pretty much wraps up the main part of this morning's show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around for that, please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues as well. Hope to see you again very soon. Tomorrow will be good. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I shall return immediately after this. Consider, if you will, the clinical reality of a long-term hospital stay. A patient confined to a bed for several months doesn't simply lose strength. They lose the fundamental connection between brain and bone. The muscles that once fired instinctively to maintain balance or navigate a staircase begin to waste away. And that's a process known as atrophy. When that patient finally stands, the primary challenge isn't just a lack of power. It's that their system has basically forgotten how to walk. The neural pathways have dimmed through disuse. They must go through the agonizing process of relearning what was once second nature. Now, in the modern plant cab, we're witnessing a digital equivalent of that bed rest. As demolition and construction equipment becomes increasingly layered with autonomous aids, big brother telematics, and digital envelopes, we need to ask the question, are we allowing the professional mental muscles of our operators to reach a state of terminal atrophy? Now, I'll get to that in just a second, because the evolution of the high-end operator has a perfect parallel in the cockpit of Formula One. Take Niki Lauda, a man who famously claimed to drive by the seat of his pants. In his era in the 70s, the driver was the sensor. There was no real-time telemetry being beamed to a room of engineers. If the rear end of his Ferrari stepped out, Lauda felt the vibration through his spine before his eyes even registered the slide. His greatness was a product of a raw, unbuffered connection to the mechanical limits of his car. And contrast that with a modern champion like Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton is by any measure one of the greatest to ever drive an F1 car. But his environment is entirely different. His car is a rolling laboratory, monitored every millisecond. If a tyre temperature spikes or a fuel mix runs lean, an engineer in the pit lane sees it before Hamilton does and provides corrective instruction over the radio. The technology makes the car faster and more efficient, but it also places a layer of digital insulation between the driver and the physics of the track. So who is the better driver? It's an impossible debate, but for our industry, the more pressing question is this: who is the more capable driver when the systems fail? If the electronics on a modern F1 car black out, the driver basically becomes a passenger. In the demolition or muck shifting world, if the digital depth restrictor on the GPS fails, does the operator still have the mental capacity and experience to finish the shift safely and effectively? We're currently fitting machines with human form detection systems and camera arrays that provide a godlike view of their surroundings. And on paper, that's a monumental leap for site safety. In practice, however, it risks creating a safety paradox. When an operator is trained to believe that the machine is taking care of the surroundings, their natural vigilance begins to decline. Why bother with physical over-the-shoulder checks or constant mirror sweeps if an alarm is supposed to scream the moment a ground worker enters the zone? That's the definition of becoming blasé. We're substituting active cognitive engagement for passive monitoring. And that reliance creates a dangerous dependency. We see it in the way that operators now check their machines. Traditionally, a pre-start check was a tactile, visual ritual. Today, a screen in the cab tells the operator their real-world status. If the screen says the levels are fine, the incentive to climb out and physically inspect the machine diminishes. The electronic system becomes the authority, and the operator becomes a mere clerk, ticking boxes based on the data they haven't personally verified. And perhaps the most significant risk of this technological creep is the erosion of tribal knowledge. The heavy plant industry has always relied on a lineage of expertise passed down through generations. A veteran operator could tell by the sound of the engine or the feel in the levers whether they were hitting a vein of rock or a pocket of clay. They knew the tricks of the trade, how to coax a machine through a difficult application without stressing the components. Now, much of that expertise is being abdicated to software. GPS-guided buckets tell the operator exactly when to stop digging. Grade control systems take over the finesse of the finish. And while that certainly levels the playing field for a novice, it also removes the necessity to learn the craft. If the machine does the thinking, the operator no longer needs to. We lose the ability to innovate and adapt on site when conditions change. We are in danger of creating a generation of operators who are excellent at following digital prompts, but lack the fundamental understanding of material behavior and machine capability. Owners and fleet managers are understandably enamored with these systems. They reduce fuel consumption, prevent overdigging, and provide a wealth of data for the boardroom. But surely we must weigh those gains against the long-term health of our workforce's skill sets. If we allow the mental muscles of our operators to atrophy by making the job too easy, we're building a fragile industry. We're creating a workforce that is highly efficient until the GPS signal drops or a sensor gets damaged. The challenge for equipment owners today is to ensure that technology remains a tool and not a replacement for talent. We must continue to value the seat-of-the-pants experience that defined the veterans of the past, even as we embrace the digital advantages of the future. Safety isn't just about sensors, it's about an engaged, sharp, and physically present operator. Efficiency isn't just about fuel maps, it's about the skill to move material with the least amount of mechanical stress. As an industry, we need to be careful that in our rush to make operators smarter, let me do that again. As an industry, we need to be careful that in our rush to make machines smarter, we aren't inadvertently making our operators less so. Sorry about the stumbles there. Got somebody else's teeth in this morning, but yeah, there we are. That's my tech-induced atrophy. I mean, we've already talked about it, but it is a concern. And let me just go back. I'm going to throw this open. I'm not a Formula One fan. Who is the better driver? A Niki Lauda or an Ayrton Senna, who were doing it literally, Jackie Stewart, Sterling Moss, doing it by the seat of their pants just by feel alone? Or is it, your modern generation of your Lewis Hamiltons and other people that I don't actually know? Who is the better driver, given the fact that, given all the assistance that those modern day drivers get? Chris Ford, there's drivers, then there's screwdrivers, then eventually you become an operator. Yeah, big difference between an operator and a driver, I would say. I'd always say put an F1 driver against a rally driver, both on top of their game, you'll see who's better. I put my money on the rally driver. They are outright lunatics and more variables to deal with. When you think about, ultimately Formula One is a lot of turning left. On a track that has been laser leveled and everything is in its right place, and you're not likely to encounter an elk or a pedestrian. Compare that to a rally driver who is hurtling round corners at 120 miles an hour and may well find a goat stood in his way. That's a whole different, and I totally agree with you. But I also think that was why we've had a few of the Finns rise through the ranks of Formula One, because they had a grounding in rally driving, and the lunacy helps. The real lunatic is the co-driver sat next to the other lunatic holding a clipboard with some notes on them. Crazy people. Yeah, I wouldn't. My personal view is that a high-skilled operator should be able to excavate without auto-dig, judge levels without a screen, and diagnose machine behavior without information processing. Yeah. I wonder, and this may come up because I know Jim is a bit of an advocate for this. I wonder if there is something to be said for like a gradual introduction of technology and driver aids, and so you learn old school, so you actually understand the machine and your environment and the application and the difference that the materials make and how materials might shift, or you how you're sat. I'm thinking more demolition here, but are you sat on a piece of stable ground, or understand all of that. After you've done that, you are then allowed to upgrade to something where the tech takes off some of that strain. And don't get me wrong, don't be led to believe that I am anti-tech. If the tech is taking care of those things that are a pain in the arse for operators, the repetitive tasks and that kind of thing, so that they can focus entirely upon the job in hand, load the truck, dig the trench, knock the building down. If they're focused entirely on that because the tech is taking care of them, fantastic. But I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't think we're not at the point yet where AI and autonomy and remote control and driver aids are an actual entire substitute for a proper operator. That's my feeling on it. Chris Ford says that's nothing. Have you seen the film Hell Drivers? That's Sean Connery and Sid James, isn't it? Fairly sure that is. I've not seen it in donkey's years, but I did see it many years ago. That's why I hate electronic levers, as you have no feel of the hydraulics or the power available in the machine. Fair point. Look at the old F1 videos, changing gear around a corner at over 120 miles an hour. I would say the old drivers were better with no driver aids. That's my feeling. As I say, I'm not an F1 fan. I really am not. I can't even. We've got haven't we got a good Brit at the moment? Lando Norris. Couldn't pick him out of a lineup. It takes place completely out of my peripheral vision. But yeah, I'm inclined to lean with the Sterling Mosses and the Jackie Stewarts and the James Hunt used to deliver his mum's papers. That's a whole other story. Jim Turner says, I still do my JD checks manually, then press the check button too when I get in the cab. The computer doesn't expect the fan belt or pull the swing drive stick. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. As a young and inexperienced D8H and scraper operator, my hardened Scottish mentor will get a can of Tiger beer for every one of the grease points I missed on my pre-start checks. Yeah, there's it's one of those things you learn that fairly quickly, don't you? You do learn that fairly quickly. Graham Hill, for my money, he raced cars from a soapbox to technical marvels and survived. Yeah. Do you not think that was awfully unfortunate? Obviously, for those of you of a certain age, may or may not know Graham Hill. Graham Hill is Damon Hill's dad. Some of a certain age may not even know who Damon Hill was, but Graham Hill was, and he did Formula One and, herring around in, as Chris Ford describes it, soapboxes, killed in a helicopter crash. That doesn't seem fair, does it? Like Lawrence of Arabia, all of that warring and fighting and stuff that he did over in the desert, killed by a motorbike. Doesn't seem fair. Doesn't seem right. Andy Dalvell says, but then I would say that the best and most absolute nutters are the real road racers on bikes, doing the Isle of Man TT and the Northwest 200 in Northern Ireland. Proper mentalists. I had a bike when I was younger. And Jim Turner says, I think Stanley Baker played the lead in Hell Drivers. I think you're right. Yeah, I had a bike when I was younger. One accident was enough for me, so that went. I quite like bikes to look at, still, and I like big slow bikes. I'd love to have me a Harley, even though I'd be too terrified to ride it on today's roads. But I can't watch the Isle of Man TT, particularly when they've got a GoPro strapped to the actual driver himself. That is too much for me. That's literally, I find myself hanging onto the seat, and I'm sat in the comfort of my own armchair. Dan says, well, so many operators are too reliant on GPS on the screen, and some even ask if it's touchscreen. Some of them are. Some of them are. Andy Dalvell says, I still don't understand why higher reach operators aren't paid more. A massive responsibility, and you have to judge and feel how the building is coming apart and change it on the fly. 100%. 100%. It's not. Frankly, if buildings came down in a predictable way, any bugger could do it. They don't do that. They don't do that. Taking that piece off there could cause all of that over there to fall down. Happens a lot. Jim Turner says the apprenticeship, either official or ad hoc, takes care of learning the little bits that will make a proper operator out of someone. I hope that's the case. Dan says, I've seen Colin McRae in a rally and the car did 180. Instead of turning, he reversed down the road at 70. Jesus. I'd say Nuvolari. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. It was better than any modern F1 driver. The pre-war GP cars from Mercedes and Auto Union were even more terrifying than those after the war. As I say, motorsport. No, I don't even know why I chose motorsport for my analogy, because I know fuck all about it, but Mike clearly does. And Colin was killed in his helicopter too. Yeah, it seems unjust, doesn't it? You spend your entire career risking life and limb at the hands of a supercar of some description or another, and then you die in a fairly innocuous way. That doesn't seem right. I always think that with rock stars. They've spent years abusing drink and drugs and groupies and generally slaughtering their bodies, and then they die of a cold. That's not right. Blaze of glory, buggers. Let's when Keith Richards, I mean, he's going to outlive me clearly, but when Keith Richards finally turns up his toes, I hope he goes out with an enormous fucking explosion. Until he got space to do wide enough to do a UE. It was mental. I'm sure it was. Mick Norton says, integrate technology only when the operator can master the basic fundamentals. That is precisely my point. And we had. I'll address this one first. Didn't Bruce Lee die when he took paracetamol? That is the legend. I've never thoroughly checked that, but I'm sure I've heard that story as well. You remember we had Alan Limoges from CM Labs on the show a few weeks back. We did an evening show with CM Labs talking about simulators. I wonder if there's room for that there. So you've got your card that says you can drive an excavator with no mod cons. Okay, you've got a bit of engine monitoring and that sort of stuff, but you've not really got any driver aids. You've been doing that for a little while. Your boss is quite content that you are good enough to take a step up to the next level, and that next level requires you first to go through a simulator where you do have all of those driver aids, and you can get used to how they all feel and where they belong and what buttons you have to press and how they'll impact upon the job you're doing. I wonder if there's a gap in the market for CM Labs and the others, 10 Star and people like that, the other simulator makers, to actually upskill. Now, I know they're doing some upskilling already, but that tends to be sort of going from novice to semi-experienced. I wonder if there's room for semi-experienced to experienced with technology. Dan says Colin McRae was nuts, flat out all the time. Nearly ran over sugary tea so his teammate could claim the race. Am I missing something? I don't know that story at all. Sugary tea? How do you go about running over sugary tea? I feel like I'm missing something. If anybody knows the story there, I'd love to hear from you. I will be back tomorrow. I do need to go to the post office today because Mr. Hatcher, assuming he sends me his postal address, will need his hat, his Rockbusters hat. Not sure if we've got any giveaways tomorrow. I'll raid the cupboard and see what we've got kicking around there. But I will be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. I don't know why I hesitated there. It's been 10 a.m. for nearly 6 years. You'd think I'd know by now, wouldn't you? Anyway, people, that's what we've got. Andy Dalvell very quickly says, how many times have you seen rally drivers finish a race with only 3 wheels? Personally, none, because I don't watch rallying. But I'm sure it happens all the time because they are quite stark raving mad. People, go and have a fine and splendid day. I'll be back tomorrow for yet more of the same. Hope you can join us. Until then, have a good one.